GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Oh, yes, he will. Oh, no, he won't. Oh, yes, he will. What am I talking about? Well, Kwasi Kwarteng's fiscal plan. There's been a lot of debate, hasn't there, about whether or not he's actually going to release it early, so we all know what on earth is going on. Well, now we have our answer. Yes, indeed, he will release it early. So, will doing so silence his critics? Over in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon says she's got no regrets, basically saying she despises the Tories. Why is politics so toxic? And is it only from one side or both? What on earth is going on? And we've had escalations again in Ukraine. Zelensky has taken to Twitter to ask for the UK to do more. Should the UK be doing more? And if so, what does that look like? Finally, a topic that I've been quite keen to talk about for a while. Online child abuse activists, vigilante groups, paedophile hunters, whatever you call them, some say they're doing a fantastic public service finding paedophiles. Other people say they are a hindrance. And now one police force has warned them to stop, basically saying it won't work with them. But should it? We'll have all of that to come, but first, let's get ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. The Prime Minister Liz Truss says Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities are a sign of Vladimir Putin's desperation. That follows a series of military setbacks. It comes after officials said at least 11 people have been killed and 64 more injured as the Kremlin launched its biggest airstrike since the start of the war in February. President Biden has also condemned the attacks, warning it highlights the brutality of Mr. Putin's war. And tomorrow, G7 leaders will hold urgent talks to discuss their response. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, who's due to take part in the G7 call virtually, said Russia was trying to wipe Ukrainians off the face of the earth.
They want panic and chaos. They want to destroy our energy system. They are hopeless. The second target is people. Such as time, such goals were specifically chosen to cause as much damage as possible. But we are Ukrainians. We help each other. We believe in ourselves. We restore everything that is destroyed.
Well, for his part, Russia's President Vladimir Putin says he thinks it was right to retaliate after an explosion badly damaged a Russian bridge and military supply line to the illegally occupied Crimea at the weekend. Putin accused Ukraine of a terrorist attack on the bridge, warning that if attacks continued against Russia, there'd be more retaliatory strikes on Ukraine.
If attempts to carry out acts of terrorism on our territory continue, Russia's response will be harsh, and its scale will correspond to that of the threat made against the Russian Federation. No one should be in any doubt about that.
Well, here, Scotland's First Minister says she's going to hold an independence referendum on the 19th of October next year if the UK Supreme Court approves it. Closing the SNP conference in Aberdeen this afternoon, Nicola Sturgeon said leaving the UK would lead to better relationships with England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Ms Sturgeon also said Scotland would rejoin the European Union. The Supreme Court will hear legal arguments this week before deciding if Holyrood has the required powers to legislate for a second vote.
The Supreme Court will consider whether the current law allows the Scottish Parliament to legislate for an advisory referendum. If Westminster had any respect at all for Scottish democracy, this court hearing would not be necessary. If the court decides in the way we hope it does, on 19th October next year, there will be an independence referendum.
The Chancellor has bowed to pressure to bring forward his much-anticipated medium-term fiscal plan. Last week, in an exclusive interview with GBNews, Kwasi Kwarteng said he was going to stick to the original date in mid-November. But today, in a letter to the chairman of the Commons Treasury Committee, he said it will now be published on the 31st of October. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has welcomed the move.
I'm pleased that they've brought forward this date to begin the process, but what I want to see and what I would do now is reverse that kamikaze mini-budget. That's got to be reversed. We need to have a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies to pay or help to pay for the energy price freeze. And what that will do, and most important of all, is to stabilise the economy, because this chaotic, irresponsible approach is all of the government's own making.
Criminal barristers in England and Wales have voted to end strike action after accepting a pay offer from the government. The offer from the Ministry of Justice includes reforms to set fees for legal aid work and an investment of £54 million in the criminal bar. Almost 57% voted to accept the deal. Strike action ended about 5 minutes ago. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Michelle and Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm with you right through until 7 o'clock tonight, and keeping me company here, we've got the broadcaster and political commentator Dominique Samuels and Peter Edwards, the former editor of Labour List. Good evening to both of you. And you know the drill on Dewbs & Co, don't you, by now? It's not just about us here, it's about you at home as well. What is on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. As a reminder, there's quite a lot I want to get into with you tonight. Politics, Kwasi Kwarteng, Nicola Sturgeon, everything that's been going on there, Ukraine, should Britain be doing more, and the whole kind of online paedophile hunting gangs that are going on, vigilantes, some people call them. Some people celebrate them and say absolutely fantastic. Where do you stand on it? One police force saying that they will no longer be working with them, and actually they're a hindrance, not a help. I suspect there'll be a few different opinions on that one, so we'll have all that to come. But first, let's get into our top story then, shall we? There's been a lot of flip-flopping around, so it seems, if it wasn't the top rate of tax, it was all about the dates of the government financial plan. What was underpinning the mini-budget that we heard about not that long ago now, the kamikaze one that we were just hearing referred to there by Starmer. Long story short, Peter, now we know this is indeed going to be brought forward to this month, the end of this month, 31st, as opposed to almost the end of November. Is this good news in your mind?
Well, I think it is good news, but it's a shame it's taken so long to get there. Remember, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, their initial reluctance or refusal to publish the detail of their plan. This was described as half a budget, and then to have the accompanying forecast by the independent OBR was not just very naive, but it was also an arrogant attempt to override a convention that's been established for about 10 years ago. So they've been caught red-handed and done a U-turn. But I want to kind of make a broader point, because we got used to hearing about U-turns about this government and the previous Conservative government. I think what would worry Conservatives and the country is this is a government that's reacting to events rather than making the news. There was a furore over 45p. They reacted. There was a furore over what you've just been talking about, the forecasts on the OBR analysis, and they reacted. And that's often the hallmark of a dying government, whether you look at the end of the Labour government or the end of the Major government. They're not making the weather, they're being blown.
But how is that the case? Because what you're saying they reacted to the reaction to their proaction. They were being very proactive, getting out on the front foot. They were being very bold, some would say, in some of their plans. Whether you agree with them or not is kind of irrelevant. They were being very bold with their thoughts. How is that reactive? Because
their role is leadership, and they said one thing, we're not going to publish a forecast, and then did the opposite. They said we're going to cut the top rate of tax, and then did the opposite. That's not leadership. It is that, but it's flip-flopping around, isn't it, Dominique? Where do you stand on it?
Oh, I completely agree with him, actually. I think that what people wanted to see from Liz Truss's government is, you know, she's sort of viewed as the Boris continuity candidate, and what they wanted from her was really that boldness, that leadership, that ability to steer the economy, and that's what she really based her platform on. But they've sort of taken the flip-flopping from Boris's government and kept that in this new government that's supposed to be so different. It's supposed to be properly conservative. It's supposed to be about, you know, shrinking the size of the state. And what we've seen, again, is them standing on policy platforms that create all of this news, all of these headlines, and then U-turn again. And I think whichever way you look at it, whether you're a Tory or not, you know, this government hasn't actually got off to a good start. Whether or not you agree with the tax announcement, the tax cut, people want to see, especially now, politicians with conviction that actually believe in their ideas. They've talked a good game up about believing in their ideas, but when it's actually coming to putting them into action, they've fallen at the first hurdle. And for many people, this is really disappointing. Unfortunately for me, people were calling me Miss Negative, but I did kind of forecast this. I really didn't think she'd be this shining light as we've all been told she would be, unfortunately.
So do you think she shouldn't have U-turned, for example, let's just say the tax thing, do you think she shouldn't have U-turned on that?
No, she shouldn't have U-turned on that. Whether or not you think it's economically viable, personally, I feel as though there could have been other priorities in terms of cutting tax for people on lower incomes. However, it's about the principle of standing on that policy platform. She presented herself as this radical alternative to Rishi Sunak, who really wanted to exercise the status quo. And she sort of confirmed to her critics that Rishi Sunak was right, which is embarrassing. And I personally don't see how she's going to last much longer. We've got the general election coming up in about 2 years. I just don't see how the Tories are going to be able to manoeuvre themselves out of this one.
Harsh. Do you agree with that?
Well, the Tories have this endless ability to adapt and reinvent themselves. Sometimes that's by saying the opposite of the truth. And I heard a minister on the radio use a phrase the other day, we're getting the debt under control, which is wrong and untrue, but also extraordinary. I wouldn't ever rule the Tories out, and similarly Labour should never be complacent. I think you'd probably expect me as a left-wing person to say Liz Truss has got the wrong ideas and then the events of the last fortnight have been chaotic. I think the challenge for the Tories is really where do they go from here? Because on day one, Liz Truss was the loser in the parliamentary party. That's just a statement of fact. More Tory MPs supported someone else to be their Prime Minister. And since then, it's only got worse. And I think there's a threshold on how many unelected Tory Prime Ministers you can have in one term. So I really think it's unlikely, although not impossible, that they'll get rid of Liz Truss before general election. But where does she go from here? Because
that would be ridiculous.
You can't get rid of another leader before a general election.
Yeah,
Goodness
I don't think
gracious me.
they would do that.
Would you tolerate that at home? What do you think to that? Peter's saying perhaps they couldn't keep hold of her until the next general election, but surely now, any Tories watching this, you must see that what's going on right now is monumental acts of self-harm. It is ridiculous. I mean, I find it mind-blowing, quite frankly, how you could have started with an 80-seat majority, a massive landslide, and have ended up where we've ended up today. Would you tolerate, then, another leadership election? And I know many of you actually voted for Liz Truss. Where do you think to where we are today? Do you back her still? Do you think she's a good idea? Many of you, I know, will be yelling at your screens right now, give the woman a chance, you'll say. You'll say she's only been in power for weeks now, a few weeks at that, an interrupted few weeks given the Queen's passing and other things. So tell me your thoughts, GBViews at gbnews.uk. And sticking with the theme of politics, Nicola Sturgeon has been on the stage and speaking out about all her plans for Scotland. It is, of course, the SNP's conference right now, but one of the reasons that she's been making headlines, I have to say, over the weekend she was talking and said, and I quote, she detests the Tories and everything they stand for. She's subsequently been asked whether or not she kind of stands by that. She makes no apology for it. She expanded on it a little bit, but the sentiment of it, she says, is there and it's valid and it's how she feels, Dominique.
Number one, I think that sort of language does reflect a general trend that you do see on the left. And I've said this so many times, for people on the left, politics is incredibly more personal for them. Your political views is an indicator of your moral values, your moral standing, how valuable you are as an individual for a lot of people on the left. And sadly, Nicola Sturgeon, she has reinforced that by saying that she detests the Tories. And when she went into a bit more of why she says this, she says that, you know, she's not talking about individual Tory voters. I think it's quite naive to suggest that it can only be isolated to the government, because we see Tory voters receiving abuse from general members of the public because of the actions of the government they support every single day. Secondly, her justification was that, you know, they've put in place policies that have destroyed so many lives. I mean, I could say the same about Nicola Sturgeon, about the failing Scottish NHS, about the failing Scottish education system, about the fact that, you know, Scotland has the highest alcohol death rate in the UK. I could say that's as a result of Nicola Sturgeon's evil socialist policy, so therefore I detest the SNP. But I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say it's a party that has an ideology that I don't support.
And you're saying this is more often than not coming from the left.
Yeah.
But a couple of years ago, Emily Thornberry actually said, I'll make sure I get my words right, that she hated the SNPs. And at the time, Nicola Sturgeon came out and said, basically chastised this and said, hate is not a good emotion to have in politics. So to me, there's a lot of hypocrisy here, because on the one hand, you're criticising someone that hates your party and saying that hate isn't good, and then on the other side, saying that you detest the Tories. Where do you stand on this? Is this a problem of the left?
She probably forgot she said that.
Yeah. Well, luckily, GBNews is here to remind you.
Well, I don't think we should talk about hating each other, and I do disagree terribly with what Dominique said. I don't hate what you said. I merely disagree with it very strongly. I think it's a massive generalisation to talk about people on the left in that way. We won't list them all now, but there's lots of things people on the right have done over many decades. But let's talk about Nicola Sturgeon. You know, she wants to break up the UK. She's decimating public services.
No, before you move me on to her policies, I do want to pick back up on this kind of hatred thing. Because, you know, we're seeing these we're seeing these political party conferences at the moment. And to me, when you actually look at the reaction of people outside, the level of protest, etc., there is a distinction between the way Tory MPs have been treated when they've arrived for their conference, the heckling, the abuse, and all the rest of it. I'm playing some of it now. I think this is this one Michael Fabricant? Yeah. Look at this. If you're listening, not watching, Michael Fabricant, he's just trying to do his job, you know, go into the conference. He's got some guy coming right up into his face, screaming goodness only knows what. And Michael Fabricant is a better man than me, because I'd be shoving that guy straight over if he was in my face like that. You know, he's very professional. He responds, he goes about his day. Why should he have to accept that? Because I didn't see anything like that, and I don't see anything like that when Labour MPs seem to get together on the whole.
Well, no one should face abuse when they do their job, full stop. I've no idea who this heckler was or person, if they were shouting verbal abuse, and I've no idea if they have anything to do with the left or the Labour Party, so we've got to be wary of making
there
assumptions.
There is a pattern, though, of people on your side of the aisle getting very, very nasty and very emotional. Even some polls have suggested that those on the left are likely to end friendships over political views, to not want to be in a relationship with someone with different political views or with someone that voted Brexit. So even in terms of actual studies that have been done, there does seem to be more of this sort of hateful attitude amongst those on the left. And I think that it's mostly explained by what I said, which is that left-wing people do view politics as incredibly more personal than other political ideologies.
Do you recognise that?
I mean, would you agree with that? I think that's fair.
No, not at all. And I know it's your job to kind of intervene, but do let me finish the answer, because I think these are massive generalisation. There was one poll, you're right, that covered, I think, friendships between people on the left and of other political views. But that was the only kind of point of evidence you cited. I've never insulted anyone because of their politics, and I have lots of friends on the right, including some of whom have been Tory candidates as well as on the left. But you've got to be really wary of these generalisations. I would say, one, there's no place for abuse, full stop. We saw Michael Fabricant, Tory MP, showing restraint. I suspect if you talk to Blair-era ministers, they would say of 15, 20 years ago, the party in government received more abuse because they're making changes, and abuse is wrong, whoever it's directed towards and whatever point in time it comes.
I mean, you say about generalisations, I can be very specific because I've run for election twice now, 2017 and 2019, in my hometown of Hull. And my hometown of Hull is very much a Labour, you'd probably call it red wall seats, you know, my seat that I was in, it's only ever been Labour. And I ran once as an independent and once as a Brexit Party candidate. And the level of abuse that I received on both times was absolutely horrific. The stuff that I've had, I've been spat at, I've had my van spat at, I've had grown men, one grown man in particular, coming over to me right in my face, telling me to, how can I say it for tea time, to get out of the city, that I wasn't welcome in the city, the amount of abuse online that I've received, and it was all because I had the audacity to challenge Labour. It was horrendous. I had the police involved in multiple occasions. I made the decision not to progress those claims because actually I wanted the police to have better things to do, quite frankly, than to have to spend their time with that. But it was horrendous. And I will admit that that was one of the experiences that's probably stopped me from returning to Labour. So for me, if I was ever considering voting Labour again going forward, those experiences that I had would probably put me off because it was horrendous. Anyone can run for election with any belief sets, and it's a democracy. And it was really not for the faint-hearted, my experience. I can tell you that. It was awful. And exclusively, it was people from the left attacking me. It wasn't people supporting the Tories that were saying to me, how dare you stand for election. It was exclusively people supporting the Labour Party that were doing that. And I used to say to the candidates, you know, this is what your supporters are doing. Can you condemn this? You should be condemning it. And it was silence. It was appalling. Put me off running for election for life, so it did.
Well, the behaviour you experienced is completely wicked and indefensible, and in some cases it goes to a criminal threshold.
Why was it exclusive from the left?
Well, I don't think for a moment it's exclusive from the left, and I think...
No, mine was. My experience was.
When I was a parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party, I received abuse from the right, but I'm not sure what this proves, other than A, it's awful, but like a lot of social ills, including racism and sexism, abuse is in different parts of society, and I think it's very dangerous and misleading to say it's in just one part of society.
No, excuse me, it's not dangerous and misleading for me to give my personal experience and to recount the fact it was exclusively from people identifying as Labour supporters. I didn't get a single utterance from anyone identifying as a Tory or a Tory supporter. It's not dangerous to suggest that. It's not misleading to suggest that. It's actually dangerous to try and deny that, because then it's people turning a blind eye to actualities, that things that are really occurring in society.
Well, I've done the opposite of denying it. I've accepted it, but I don't know at all if there are people from the Labour Party, and I don't think
no,
at
but
all...
I'm telling you that was the case.
Yeah, and I'm telling you that as a candidate I experienced abuse from people on the right, but I'd be wary of drawing wider conclusions that I couldn't evidence.
Yeah, I don't even think it needs to be isolated to political parties, though. I'm more talking about on the ideological scale. You cannot deny what you see in front of you. You see the protesting of Extinction Rebellion, the protesting of Just Stop Oil, that very violent, emotionally charged form of getting your opinion across. You see, with Antifa, who were in Brighton not long ago, harassing and abusing women that believe in biological sex, one of the people that was videoed screaming at a man, basically calling him a transphobe with a baby in his hand, was found to be working for a Labour politician. There are things that we see in front of us where people on the left do seem to exercise this self-righteous view about themselves, that they're more moral than everyone else, and therefore that justifies abusive behaviour. And you can deny it, but I think everyone can see it, which is why they have this label.
If you do bring it back to the Brexit times, I'm loath to do that, but if you do that, there were a lot of Remain supporting MPs that were... you know, what's the word? Like when you're very, I won't say assaulted, but certainly harassed, goaded, all the rest of it from Remain supporters, people that didn't want to, you know, leave and stay, and vice versa. People that were Remainers, MPs, they were harassed, etc., by Brexit supporting people as well. So it's just, for me, the whole thing has just gone too far, and I don't understand why we can't have respectful disagreement. Why does it have to be the case that I don't disagree with you, I literally hate you? I can't fathom it. I don't know what it is. If you understand this better, if you are someone actually, if you are somebody that's abused, whether it's a politician, whether it's a candidate, whatever, of the opposite ilk to you, tell me why. Why can't you just sit there and respect, actually, he or she has a different persuasion to me, a different value set, whatever it is, I don't know. Why does it tip that line into becoming abusive? I'd be fascinated by your thoughts. Be honest, I won't call your name out if you have been doing that. I'm just fascinated as to what does drive that behaviour. Phil, he says, it's all about when you stand up for what is right, people are not liking it if you don't go along with people's agenda. Michelle, as this says, Stuart, Michelle, you never hear anyone from the left criticising their own people.
Oh, I think that is nonsense. Think how much Labour MPs received abuse from some people on the far left, regardless of what party they're in, if any. Ask Stella Creasy about all the rape threats she received. The idea that Labour MPs haven't spoken out against abuse really is nonsense.
There you go, that told you, Stuart. Ian says, Michelle, this all boils down to the Brexit result. Does it? Do you think that's where it all stems? I'm trying to think, prior to the whole Brexit thing...
That's where it started.
Yeah, was it as nasty before Brexit?
No, I don't think.
Well, I'm trying to speak out against many things, including generalisations, but I suspect if you go back to the 80s, where my earliest political memories were, there'd be a lot of awful stories then. What we have now is social media, which is an amplifier for some of these existing disgusting traits.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Let me know your thoughts. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. I am particularly fascinated to hear from you tonight, if indeed you are someone that does abuse the opposite side. I won't read your name out, don't worry. It'll stay between us, but I'm interested in your motive. Tell me, why can't we have respectful disagreement? Get in touch. Tell me your thoughts. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about Ukraine. There's been a massive escalation there. Zelensky's been tweeting a couple of hours ago saying that basically he wants the UK to step up and do more. Should we be? And what does more look like? Tell me, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through with you till 7 o'clock tonight and keeping me company. We have the broadcaster and political commentator Dominique Samuels and Peter Edwards, the former editor of Labour List. You guys have been getting in touch about those last topics. The whole politics, where do you stand on it? Why is it so nasty? And what do you think about the whole kind of changing of the minds from government? Paul says, Michelle, it's better to have a government that has the ability to change direction rather than one that becomes stuck in a world of sound bites, he says. Colin says, Michelle, if a government doesn't listen to popular opinion, they are wrong. And if they do, they are perceived as weak. They simply cannot win. Terry says, Michelle, how can you find fault with a government that actually listens to what the people say and are prepared to change the narrative to make it easier for people?
The people or the media, though?
Well, this is a very good point. This is a very good point Dominique raises. Terry, she says, is it the people that they're listening to or is it the media? Tell me your thoughts on that. Lots of opinions, lots and lots of opinions. Are you backing Truss? That's what I'm wondering. Did you vote for her? And if you did, are you still backing her? Get in touch. Tell me. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email address. Now, there's been a horrific escalation in the situation over in Ukraine over the last few days. There's a huge explosion, of course, on that bridge which connects Russia with the Crimea. And then seemingly a retaliation for that, with many people left dead. Now, President Zelensky has been tweeting this afternoon and he says the following. I've had a phone call with Prime Minister Liz Truss. We count on Britain's leadership in consolidating international political and defence support for Ukraine, in particular regarding the protection of our skies and also in the further isolation of Russia. So, my question to you guys tonight is, should Britain be doing more?
Yes, I think we should redouble our efforts. You know, we can't be neutral. And I was very interested in this photo of Vladimir Putin giving an address to the nation, you know, with a smart suit and the livery of state. He's trying to give the impression of a statesman pursuing legitimate aims, when he's the opposite. You know, he's a criminal and a bloodthirsty warmonger who's now making veiled threats of nuclear weapons, and we can't tell if they're genuine or not. But, you know, he's a dangerous, wicked man. And cast your mind back a few weeks where we had the bombing of a maternity hospital. We've had men, women and children killed across the conflict, but mums-to-be, new mums and babies put at risk and in some cases murdered in their beds, followed by Vladimir Putin cheering in Red Square, saying, well done me. I mean, is a brazen mass murderer. And I think everywhere across British politics and Europe, we've swung behind Zelensky, but I think we are in it for the long haul.
And what does the long haul look like to you? Is it decades? Is it what?
No, I don't think it'll be decades, but I think we were a bit late getting sanctions we've started under Boris Johnson. To be fair, though, he did ramp it up enormously in his last few months in office. We've supplied weapons, we've supplied training. I suspect we're doing a bit more than that can't be disclosed for security reasons. And as grim as it is, because no one wants a war, but it's a war that Ukraine must win, I think we just have to keep giving weapons to Ukraine because there can't be a negotiation when the negotiation is based on giving up part of a sovereign nation. Zelensky's made that clear.
So would you be prepared for this to go on for decades if it means that Zelensky's the winner?
Well, I think we're all desperate to avoid that, and even the horrors of that.
But answer the question, though, yes or no?
Well, hold on.
Yes.
Would I be prepared to allow it to go on for decades?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to go on for decades. We all hate war.
Would if it were a certainty that in order for President Zelensky to win, this would have to go on for at least a decade, would you, because you've expressed that Zelensky needs to win and there can't be any agreement in terms of territory, so it has to be all out war, would you be prepared for this to last a decade?
Yeah, so 1 decade. You said decades before and Putin's 70, but has Britain got to be willing to support Ukraine for a decade? Yes, because the alternative, as Zelensky said, is Ukraine being wiped off the map.
So your answer is yes. And this is my problem with this, like, almost robotic must support Zelensky, must support Ukraine
but what's your
forever take on this, because it's not realistic. We've been radicalised into essentially supporting World War III and nuclear war. And this isn't a video game. And I wish the people that are pushing for this, that are supporting Zelensky, who I'm not going to use flowery words now, I think he's irresponsible, I think he's out of control, and I think that he needs to be reined in. We cannot afford for this to go on for a decade. So even if it were a possibility that he would definitely win in a decade, we cannot afford for this to go on. Even just recently, the OPEC announced that it was cutting oil production, which obviously Russia's very happy about, because that means even in places like America, oil prices are going to skyrocket now. Right before the midterms, by the way, that Biden's got to win because the Democrats are losing control of Congress. So financially, we're going to be in a position where we simply cannot fund this. There was even articles a few months ago about the likelihood of us being able to fund this war past 2022. What we need to be focusing on is a diplomatic solution, and that may indeed have to include assurances that Ukraine won't join NATO and allowing Russia to keep some of the territory that it's acquired already. But for example, Crimea.
You challenge me.
There's no way that they're going to be able to get Crimea back.
I have to challenge you. I hope you forgive me interrupting, but you challenge me. Zelensky is a hero to millions of people around the world. I don't think it's fair to be so negative about him. He didn't seek this war. It was forced upon him by the actions of one man in the Kremlin.
So you think that it's just the big, bad boogeyman? Because people on the left love to talk about being anti-establishment and all of this, but when it comes to these types of wars, which almost mimics the sort of rhetoric that was going on around the Iraq war, you think that there's no two sides to play in this, that America do not have any role whatsoever in using Ukraine as a proxy to fight Russia? You don't think so? It's all just big bad.
Biden's been absolutely clear that he doesn't want a war with Russia. And I think no one wants a war with Russia. No one wants a war full stop. But the idea of a war with another nuclear power is
Biden doesn't want a war in Ukraine.
No, I said
Biden says otherwise.
No. But sorry, you do keep cutting me off. Biden said explicitly he doesn't want a war in Russia. Of course, Britain and America have strategic interests in Ukraine. But remember, neither Zelensky nor Ukraine wanted this war. It was forced upon them by an illegal invasion. Iraq is incomparable. Britain invaded Iraq.
I think it is comparable.
Britain has not invaded Ukraine. Britain has not invaded anywhere. I think the Iraq comparison is totally misleading.
No, it's about...
Russia invaded Ukraine.
No, it's the reason why I highlight Iraq is because it's about the rhetoric around it. So the rhetoric around Vladimir Putin is that he's this madman who's lost his mind. He wants to recreate the Soviet Union, which is stupid, because why would he want to do that? It doesn't make any sense. He wants to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. He's going to nuke London. All of this stuff, we're being pushed closer and closer into supporting all-out war and NATO getting involved in this conflict.
I haven't said any of those things.
But with regards to Iraq, it was the same kind of alarmist rhetoric. We need preemptive action. How the neoconservatives supported their warmongering agenda. Now we're hearing the need for preemptive action against Putin. It's the same language. And the fact that people cannot see that we're being sleepwalked into supporting something that is against all of our interests
is not preemptive
mind-blowing.
When the Ukrainian people are already in the graveyard. It's not preemptive.
Again, you're employing emotion, though. You're employing emotion instead of looking logically and actually examining the things that Mr. Irresponsible Zelensky has said. Even there, protection of our skies. A few months ago, he was calling for a no-fly zone, which would mean that we would have to shoot down Russian planes.
Yeah,
it would mean World War III. The other day, he was talking about preemptive strikes against Russia. They then had to clarify that he didn't mean preemptive nuclear action.
President Zelensky is not running the UK. He did call for a no-fly zone. Zelensky's not running the UK. That's nonsense. Boris Johnson, whether you agree with him or not, said at the start of the conflict that Britain wouldn't put troops on the ground.
So these calls then for a no-fly zone, do you think that the UK should be helping to partake in creating a no-fly zone over Ukraine?
Well, I'm very nervous about that for the reason that Dominic outlines. Although I disagree enormously with nearly everything Dominic said, but with a no-fly zone, logical extension is that you'd be willing to shoot down a Russian jet. And that's a whole other level of escalation that we should be deeply concerned about. So I think that's where Britain has, and to give credit to the Tories, have not been gung-ho. They have been risk-averse as anyone would be, because no one wants the war.
Not been very risk-averse. I don't think.
But to be fair, I don't agree with Boris Johnson on pretty much anything, but he was clear we don't want war with Russia.
Doesn't that worry you?
And
Doesn't that worry you a bit? The fact that you don't agree with a politician like Boris Johnson on just about anything, but you just so happen to agree with Boris Johnson on Ukraine or on this war.
But I'm not
For all
that
of the left-wing people that are actually watching this, that support this establishment line on Ukraine, they really do need to do some investigating. Your red line is nuclear war, as you've just said.
That's not my red line. Why are you waving your pen at me?
It's because you wouldn't support a no-fly zone. So, obviously, the following on from that, you shoot down a Russian plane, we're playing World War III, folks. That's your red line. So you must have a backbone and say that Zelensky's repeated comments about protecting skies and about preemptive strikes, they're irresponsible and he needs to be reined in. You should be brave enough to say that.
I think you're getting too angry waving a pen at me and saying what my red lines are. And I'm not sure viewers really care what my red lines are. I'm not an ambassador to anywhere. But I think a no-fly zone is fraught with additional risks for everyone.
So he should stop saying that then, shouldn't he?
Let me ask you about this, because I found this quite interesting. So the Indian Foreign Ministry, so after this escalation, they came out and said they support all attempts to de-escalate and return to a path of diplomacy and dialogue. Of course, they condemned the escalation, etc. But I found that quite interesting, that their rhetoric is all around diplomacy, de-escalation and dialogue. And I don't seem to hear any utterance, certainly from Truss or Johnson, about peace, about de-escalation. Why does that seem to be lacking, that narrative?
Well, let me answer that in a simple sentence, which is Britain, all sides of the political argument, called for diplomacy and de-escalation before the war happened. But unfortunately, it has happened. And I'm a bit worried we're treating this as an academic exercise. People are dying now.
You're the one treating this as an academic exercise. If you really cared about people dying, you would be the first person, like all of the humanitarian people on the left. You should be crying out for a diplomatic solution.
Dominic.
Because all that will happen is the same amount of people are going to die, but just with a different outcome. And that outcome will likely be Ukraine having to say they won't join NATO or ceding some of their territory. And what will probably happen, I think, is Russia will keep Crimea, may keep other parts of Ukraine, and those same amounts of people will still be dead, and that'll be your fault.
Let Peter respond.
I don't think it does you any favours by saying that me or anyone else doesn't care about people dying. I think we all care about people dying.
I'm not saying you don't, but you're the one mentioning people that are dead.
That is what you just said, Dominique. You said I didn't care about people dying. I think we can disagree, like we were saying earlier about Sturgeon, we can disagree but not go to that level. We're all worried about people dying. That's why we're talking about it.
But can I just respond to that? Because you're the one who mentioned people dying. You said this isn't an academic exercise. I'm saying if we want to start talking about people dying, you should be the first person screaming out for diplomacy then, because the same people are going to die with an even more unfavourable outcome. That's my point. So
Yeah.
I apologise if...
That's
don't need to apologise. No.
That's certainly what I want to hear more. I want to hear more talk of resolution, peace, because there's no winners in a war like this.
I know we've got to move on, but your question was, Dominique's question was, should we be willing to stick it out even if it takes years? The answer from me is yes, 100%. And I think the answer from the two biggest political parties in Britain is the same.
And I think neither of them should be in power. So
I think we do obviously as well need to be clear that this isn't a situation that only just started in February. This is a situation that's been going on for many, many years so far already. Tell me your thoughts. GBViews at gbnews.uk is the email address you can reach me on. Nigel says, of course we can do more for Ukraine and we should. I'm asking you what that is. What does that mean when you say do more, Nigel? Is it more money, more training, more arms? Like what? Is it boots on the ground? Where do you want that more to come from and to look like? Mary, on the other hand, says, my opinion is absolutely no more aid to Ukraine. Tell me why, Mary. I'm interested in that perspective as well. Many people are concerned, of course, about where will this end. Peter, not you. I don't think you've been typing while you're sitting there. Peter says, we should absolutely set up a no-fly zone by whatever means. Peter, my question to you, not this Peter, the other Peter that's just emailed in, is Do you see that as an escalation? When you say no-fly zone, are you aware that what you're calling for there is Russian jets potentially to be shot down? Who do you want to be doing that shooting down? And what, if any, in your mind, ramifications, response, escalation, do you think that might prompt? Interested in your thoughts on all of that. gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. Now, quick break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about so-called online paedophile hunters. They divide opinion, I've got to say. Some people say they're doing essential public service. Others say they are dangerous vigilantes. One police force is ruling out working with them, and I wonder, where do you stand on it? Tell me, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, till 7 o'clock tonight, keeping me company, the broadcaster and political commentator, Dominic Samuels, and Peter Edwards, former editor of Labellist. That last debate on Dewbs & Co really got you talking about Ukraine and what more the UK should be doing, if anything at all. Very, very divided opinions, obviously, of course, on the panel, but also with you at home. Lots of you getting in touch saying we must have a no-fly zone. Many other people coming up and saying we must have peace. If you're in the latter camp, do you feel like we're making any progress towards that peace? This whole thing being brought to an end? I don't, and that worries me greatly. But let me know your thoughts on all of that. Now, here's a topic I've been keen to talk about for quite some time, actually. Paedophile hunting groups online. You know, they get called different things, don't they? Some say they're vigilantes. Some people say they're basically doing God's work. They're doing a great public service. But North Yorkshire Police has called on these groups now to stop what they're doing and leave the investigations to them. Now, if you're not familiar, by the way, these are basically groups of people that pose as children. They get online, they start talking to predominantly grown men, arrange to meet these children, then they sting, basically. They're going to meet them, and they often stream it live on the internet. So that is the group we're talking about if you're not familiar. Dominique, where do you stand?
Well, of course, I wouldn't advocate for anyone to break the law, but at the same time, can we only rely on the police to protect our children? No, I'm sorry, we can't. There's one stat here that I've got. There's the backlog of child sexual abuse cases has risen by 70% during COVID. That's so many children not receiving justice. And I've watched a few documentaries about this sort of thing, so it's really interesting that you've actually brought this up. Because what the police do is essentially what these so-called vigilante groups do, just with less bureaucracy. So whilst I understand the implications and how it might at some point mess up child sex abuse cases, I have seen videos, I have seen these groups, and what does happen a lot of the time is that they find these people, they admit to what they've done, they keep them in one place, and all they do is call the police and show the police the evidence. Really, they're doing a job that the police aren't actually doing sufficiently enough right now. So can I attack these people, say they should stop doing it? No, I can't.
So you want them to continue, and do you think the police should be working more closely with them?
I do think the police can use them as an opportunity to, you know, work closer and get better intelligence. I think so, absolutely. Because the police are obviously struggling with resources at the moment, and perhaps there aren't enough resources given to them to deal with these specific types of crimes, you know, I think they should use all of the help that they can get. Sorry.
So basically you're saying they should be saying thank you to these people, not saying pack it in. Peter?
No, I think I'm more in a space of pack it in for all sorts of reasons. I think inadmissible evidence in court is what would be one of the things that worries me most, because these people are amateurs, and the reason that we kind of pay our taxes and vote governments in is to have professionals. So I wouldn't want an amateur treating me or my family member if we had a serious illness. I certainly don't agree to paying my taxes to an amateur who's helping out HMRC, and I don't want amateurs trying to do the job of the police. I have some sympathy for the police who, of course, would say some of this is a resource question, but in my previous life as a newspaper reporter, I've sat through quite a few sex cases, including child sex cases, anonymised, and beyond the horror of their acts and the headline, there is often a year or two of kind of methodical, fairly slow detective work that is required to get to a conviction. And this is particularly talking about child abuse, but when we're talking about other types of sex crimes like rape, where we know that the conviction rate is shamefully low, I think the idea of amateurs getting involved in the detection of any types of this activity is very worrying indeed.
But they've got the proof. They've got the person that was meeting up with the child. That person's face is on the internet. I'm sorry, I don't have a problem with that.
So let me ask you this, though. A legal threshold accepted by a jury.
Well, often what happens with these groups is they live stream the confrontation.
Yeah.
So are you comfortable with that bit?
Yeah, the person admits to it in a lot of these videos. If the person, you know, denies it, then fair enough. But they've got evidence, and the people do end up actually admitting to it. And the likelihood of these people serving serious time or getting any sort of proper punishment is low. So you can't, like, be gaslighting people and saying that they shouldn't be taking these sorts of things into their own hands when our justice system isn't protecting these people that need to be protected. So if my daughter, for example, if I had one, was abused and there was some weirdo talking to her online, I'd want that person to have their face broadcast on the internet, I'm sorry.
And do you know, there are children on the internet all the time, at various different ages. Often they're not properly supervised when they're online. Isn't there a part of you that thinks, yes, you know, all about law and order and process to be applied, but isn't there a part of you, Peter, that thinks actually anything at all that will stop a child? Because if a man is talking to, let's call them paedophile hunters, and trying to meet with a 12-year-old, then, you know, he wants to meet with a 12-year-old. So if he's not talking to the adult posing as a 12-year-old, the next thing he could be doing is talking to an actual 12-year-old.
Exactly.
So isn't there a part of you that's basically in favour of anything that will try and keep those kids safe?
Well, I think the key word in that really is anything, because certainly anyone who's a parent, and millions of people who are not parents, have concerns about what their children might see online or be encouraged to take part in. And, you know, you can't and wouldn't want to monitor your children 24 hours a day. But what is the end result? Because to me, the only decent end result is a conviction. And if the police say we're not getting the convictions,
well, not
then
necessarily.
what is it achieving?
Well, I'll tell you, you know, if you, I mean, I'm not a paedophile, but if you were to think basically from their perspective, if they are indeed the kind of person that is inclined to go after a 12-year-old or younger child, and then they have the experience of actually being collared by one of these groups, streamed wherever, I bet my bottom dollar that these guys, even if they're not convicted in a criminal court, I bet my bottom dollar they would think twice about ever going on the internet again and trying to get hold of kids.
Well, Michelle, I think as a rational, law-abiding person, you're applying those standards to people who are sick and irrational and not law-abiding. And it just doesn't stack up because you'd never have repeat offenders. Every repeat offender has already been convicted once. These people are sick enough and stupid enough, paedophiles, that they are not put off by this type of activity.
Well, you tell me what you think to all of this. A divided opinion from you guys at home. Many of you are saying, yeah, that's fascinating, leaving it to the police, but they didn't do much in places like Telford, etc. I hear what you're saying there. Someone says the police should be doing more of that stuff rather than dancing at parades. They're never going to live that Macarena down, those police, are they? John says the police have been ineffective for decades at protecting our children. What did anyone expect other than our communities coming together to sort it out? What, John says, is the alternative to that? Tony says paedophilia is evil, and anything that can bring it to account and eradicate this obscenity in society is fine by me. Heather says this is simple. Where the police work police, the great British public will. Tell me your thoughts on that one. I can see them flying in. Lots of you have appreciated the debates on tonight's show. Thank you for that. That's all I've got time for. Dominique, Peter, thank you very much. Nigel is up at 7. Nigel, good evening. Welcome back. What have you got for us?
Michelle, thank you. Good to be back. Well, so many people are crossing the English Channel. Not that you'd know it, because there's no other mainstream media covering it at all. They now want to put people in luxury hotels in Cornwall. We have a full investigation. But before all of that, let's get the all-important weather.
Hello, Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Clear spells for many overnight, and that means, of course, it will be chilly in places, particularly in the south, whilst a bit more of a breeze and showers continue in the north, especially for northern Scotland and the northwest of Scotland, where tight isobars remain just to the south of an area of low pressure moving into Norway. And it's in this area where we'll see further spells of cloud and showers overnight, along with a keen breeze. A bit more shelter there for the east of Scotland, as well as for much of England and Wales, Northern Ireland, keeping clear spells overnight as well. So where we get the clear spells, temperatures into the mid or even low single figures, and perhaps for some of the more sheltered spots across central parts of England, 0 degrees. So certainly a cold start to the day on Tuesday. Milder for the northwest of Scotland, where we'll see further showers from the word go. They'll also affect parts of Northern Ireland. And then those showers turning to perhaps more persistent rain later in the afternoon. We'll also see 1 or 2 showers for southern Scotland, northern England, but further south,